Welcome to this week's session on organization and leadership in academic libraries. We're moving from how leadership has been defined and debated, all the way through to what the most recent research tells us about leading in today's environment. Let's get into it. 6 goals for today. You'll be able to critique leader-centered models and explain a relational alternative. Identify core traits academic librarians value in leaders based on evidence. Apply the leadership, followership, and organizational culture framework to library scenarios. Evaluate professional competency frameworks. Understand inclusive leadership as a way of leading, not a program. And assess how post-pandemic changes are reshaping leadership expectations. Nobody fully agrees on what leadership is, and that tension is meaningful. Stockdale defines it as the process of influencing an organized group toward its goals. Practical, focused on outcomes. Smirchich and Morgan go deeper. Leadership is the process by which someone frames and defines reality for others. On that view, the leader creates meaning, and followers choose whether to accept it. Without that voluntary acceptance, leadership hasn't actually occurred. Why does the definition matter? Because if leadership is about influence, we focus on leader behavior. If it's about meaning-making, we focus on relationships and culture. Libraries need both, but the second is consistently underinvested. And one thing to hold, Alveson and Svenningsson call leadership highly contextual. What works in one library may fail in another. Context is part of the analysis, not a footnote. Once you see the romance of leadership, you can't unsee it. It's the widespread tendency to attribute organizational success and failure overwhelmingly to a single leader, regardless of what actually caused either. When a library thrives, the director gets the credit. When it struggles, the director gets the blame. Then we replace the director. This feels rational, but it isn't, because it ignores everything else shaping outcomes: culture, staff, history, resources. What this pattern produces: leaders get credit they didn't fully earn and blame they don't fully deserve. Followers become invisible. Unrealistic expectations get placed on individuals. And when things go wrong, we replace leadership instead of learning anything. The root causes go unexamined. The corrective isn't to dismiss leadership, it's to recognize that leaders, followers, and organizational culture all share responsibility for outcomes, and all three require investment. Martin's framework treats leadership as the product of 3 interacting forces. Leaders create and communicate meaning, direction, vision, interpretation of events. But their effectiveness depends entirely on whether followers accept and act on that meaning. Followers are active agents. They choose whom they follow. They can accept a leader's vision, reinterpret it, ignore it, or resist it. Martin puts it plainly: good leadership may well be good followership. Organizational culture sets the boundaries. It determines what meanings are acceptable, how work gets done, and who belongs. A vision has to be culturally legible to gain traction. All 3 influence each other simultaneously. Leadership doesn't flow top-down. It emerges from the ongoing interaction among all 3. The diagnostic question this gives you: before calling something a leadership problem, ask, what are leaders doing, what are followers doing, and what is the culture enabling or preventing? Martin surveyed 318 academic librarians, asking them to describe a leader who positively influenced their daily work life. 7 themes emerged. Emotional intelligence ranked first. Empathy was the single most cited trait. Self-awareness, relationship building, authenticity, all part of this. Martin's argument is that every other theme is strengthened by emotional intelligence. It's foundational. Empowering was second. Supportive, trusting, delegating, mentoring. Only a secure leader can truly empower others because it means giving authority away. Visionary thinker was third. Intelligent, politically aware, strategic, able to advocate for the library in the broader institution. Communicator came fourth, and critically, listening ranked almost as highly as communicating. An open door isn't just policy, it signals accountability. Librarian manager was fifth, deeply competent in library work. Being one of us matters in a specialized profession. Technical credibility is a prerequisite for cultural acceptance. Trustworthy was sixth. Without trust, none of the other qualities function. Followers forgive mistakes from leaders they trust. They rarely forgive anything from leaders they don't. And catalyst for change was seventh. Innovative, flexible, open-minded, comfortable with managed risk. No meaningful differences appeared by generation or gender. The profile was consistent across the profession. The same study asked what traits future leaders will need. Six themes emerged, and the shift from the past leader themes is visible. The emphasis moves toward people-first skills and vision, reflecting a profession that knows it's in deep transition. People-first ranked highest: empathy, support, collaboration, inclusivity, mentorship. The underlying logic: the future demands leaders who can carry people through continuous disruption. Visionary came second. Nearly a third of respondents explicitly named vision. A vision isn't just a strategic plan, it's the meaning that makes change bearable. Change agent was third. Adaptable, flexible, innovative. Tightly coupled with visionary, having a vision without the capacity to implement it produces frustration, not progress. Experienced librarian was fourth. Credibility requires demonstrating you understand and have done the work. There is no shortcut. Role model was fifth. Ethical, positive, authentic. Followers look to leaders to set the emotional and ethical tone, especially during uncertainty. And communicator was sixth. Transparent, multimodal, an active listener. Transparent here means honest about all organizational decisions, not just the good news. ALA Core identified 49 leadership and management competencies across domains including communication, team building, strategic planning, financial management, change management, ethics, and advocacy. These give the profession a shared vocabulary for leadership development and evaluation. Wong's 2019 work adds a critical insight. Not every competency matters equally in every context. Her approach lets libraries prioritize from that landscape based on current challenges, organizational maturity, and strategic direction. The key takeaway: competency frameworks are starting points, not prescriptions. They're diagnostic instruments. Use them to generate questions, not close them. And when you map Martin's empirical themes onto these frameworks, they align closely, validating both approaches and pointing toward a durable core of what the field expects from its leaders. Four components from Goleman's framework: self-awareness, knowing your emotions, strengths, limitations, and how you affect others. Leaders who lack it cause harm without recognizing it. Self-regulation, managing your emotional responses under pressure. When a leader panics or shuts down, the organization feels it. Empathy, reading and responding to what people actually need, not just what they say. Essential for inclusive leadership, change management, and building trust. Relationship management, the practical application of the other three. Building trust, developing people, managing conflict constructively. Why this matters specifically in libraries: librarianship is emotionally intensive work. Staff navigate competing demands with constrained resources and limited authority. A leader who can't model emotional intelligence can't expect it from their organization. Post-pandemic research reinforced this. Library staff placed exceptional weight on leaders who could acknowledge difficulty and create psychological safety. Emotional intelligence became something closer to a survival competency. Inclusive leadership is not a program that sits alongside how you lead. It shapes how you perceive problems, make decisions, and structure participation. In practice, actively seeking diverse perspectives in high-stakes decisions, creating psychological safety so all staff can contribute without penalty, recognizing and mitigating bias in hiring, promotion, and task assignment, using positional power to amplify marginalized voices, treating belonging as a structural design challenge, not a cultural attitude you hope develops on its own. The academic library context makes this urgent. The workforce remains predominantly female and predominantly white, while the communities libraries serve are increasingly diverse. Leaders who can't build inclusive organizations face compounding consequences: retention failures, inability to serve communities, declining credibility. The developmental challenge: inclusive leadership requires giving up certain forms of control. Treating your own view as one legitimate perspective rather than the default correct one is genuinely countercultural in hierarchical organizations. Worth noting, the people-first theme followers identified in Martin's research anticipates exactly what Meyer's 2025 work formally documents. Followers knew what they needed before the research named it. Focus groups with library staff and faculty after COVID-era disruption found that some competencies have become newly critical and some previously adequate approaches are no longer sufficient. Supporting the whole person. Staff bring their full lives to work. Effective leaders build structures that acknowledge this rather than pretending work and life are cleanly separate. Modeling self-care. Leaders who perform in vulnerability undermine the psychological safety their staff need. Visible self-care signals organizational permission for everyone to have limits, creating sustainable workplaces. Burnout in academic libraries predates the pandemic and intensified through it. Managing workload and addressing structural drivers of burnout are leadership responsibilities, not individual coping challenges. Managing conflict. Post-pandemic organizations have surfaced tensions about equity, workload, and hybrid work that were previously suppressed. Leaders who avoid conflict allow those tensions to calcify into dysfunction. Managing flexibility fairly. Hybrid work is now permanent. Managing it equitably, including the inequities between roles that can and can't go remote, is a skill most preparation programs haven't yet addressed. The implication: frameworks developed before 2020 are incomplete. Future leaders need explicit preparation for sustainability, whole-person support, and conflict in hybrid environments. How do library leaders actually develop? Formal institutes through ALA, ACRL, and ARL provide structured learning and mentorship networks. Their value isn't just the content, it's the relationships that persist afterward. Mentorship is consistently identified as one of the most formative mechanisms. It provides situated, relational learning that structured programs can't replicate. Breadth of experience matters too. Working across multiple library departments builds stronger, more adaptive leaders than staying in one functional area. But real gaps exist. Racial, gender, and dominant culture biases persist in advancement pipelines. Mid-career support is chronically under-resourced, and some competencies can't be developed until someone is actually in a senior role, which creates a structural paradox where the profession demands experience before providing opportunity. That paradox disproportionately affects those without access to informal networks. For you in this program, graduate education is one of the few moments you can engage systematically with leadership theory before entering practice. Use that opportunity intentionally. A few things to carry forward. Leadership is not a property of a person. It is an outcome of relationships between leaders, followers, and organizational culture. The romance of leadership persists in how we hire and how we tell institutional stories. But the research points consistently elsewhere. Followers are agents. They choose to follow, and their perceptions of a leader's competence and trustworthiness determine whether leadership actually works. Emotional and interpersonal competencies are the core, not the complement. Technical competence is necessary but not sufficient. Vision and change leadership are steady-state requirements. In a profession of continuous disruption, these are baseline expectations, not emergency skills. Inclusive leadership is a professional standard. Organizations that cannot build belonging cannot serve diverse communities or retain talent, and context determines which competencies matter most. Effective leaders diagnose their situation before applying generic frameworks. That judgment, knowing when and how to use what you know, is what leadership actually requires. That's the lecture. We'll pick this up in the next session. Take a moment to look at this. The three forces, leaders, followers, and organizational culture, don't operate in sequence. They push and pull on each other at the same time, often in tension, sometimes in alignment. Leadership is never a solo act. It emerges from all three simultaneously. 4 things to hold on to. First, relational over individual. Reject the romance of leadership and invest in leaders, followers, and culture together, not just the person at the top. Second, emotional intelligence is foundational. Empathy, self-awareness, and relationship management are the core of library leadership, not the complement to it. Third, inclusion is a standard. It is no longer aspirational. It is a professional requirement for serving diverse communities. And fourth, develop intentionally. Leaders are made, not found. The profession and LIS programs must close the gaps in the pipeline. I'll leave you with the line that anchors all of it. Martin, 2019. Good leadership may well be good followership.